Somebody like Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is always talking about how he stands for minorities and so forth. Has he stood for you?
No, he hasn't stood for me. He hasn't stood for any trans Canadian. And again, he was the same person who went out with that reflexive woman's right to choose line the moment Roe versus Wade comes out.
The judgment coming out of the United States is an attack on women's freedom, and quite frankly, it's an attack on everyone's freedoms and rights.
The reason that it is harder to buy estrogen than get a government-funded abortion in Canada is specifically the federal government, which has scheduled hormone replacement. We're talking about medicine that is chemicals our own body make, medicine that is safer than aspirin, medicine that, unlike hormone blockers such as Lupron that are given to adolescents, don't have a litany of negative side effects. No, this Prime Minister doesn't care. That's part of the reason that I'm running.
The Alberta Liberal Party put out a news release saying that it had to end its leadership race because nobody wanted the job. However, a trans woman from Edmonton says that's not true. She wanted the job, but was shunned by the party. Tell me your story about how you wanted to be running for the leadership of the Liberal Party of Alberta, and they denied you.
Well, I was running for the leadership of the Liberal Party of Alberta between the 28th of May and the 13th of June. And because they had known of my intention to run for a period of time, I believe the executive tailored rules that were designed to frustrate any campaign that wasn't connected to insider money within the party already. That's what they did. They released a series of rules designed to stop campaigns from being able to raise the money via campaigning. You had to present your entire deposit, be nominated first before you could begin campaigning. Well, what's that going to do to an insurgent campaign? What's that going to do to someone built around low-dollar events instead of, a couple of old insiders who've been donating thousands of dollars to the Alberta Liberal Party every year despite its increasing futility?
Nobody has stepped forward to want to lead this party, and that was in the media, very well reported. How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel like they're afraid of me, and they're afraid of the growing number of Albertans who understand that freedom is a liberal value.
So it appears now that the Liberal Party of Alberta is are they now seeking new candidates? Have they given up on leadership? What's the situation?
I don't know. You'd have to ask the executive because they've stonewalled me. They've stonewalled other journalists who've tried to get a straight answer out of them. I'll say here and now, we need a very open contest. We should have a deposit that reflects the percentage of the popular vote we got. We should have abolished entirely the notion that the executive gets to decide who runs. It's supposed to be the membership who decides who runs. And we can sort it out through a fair and open and vigorous process. Instead of this fixation on, we have to have a leader for an election where we know the Alberta Liberal Party is not going to win a single seat.
You're a trans woman. Do you think they hold that against you?
Well, see, the thing is about parties on the ostensible left is they absolutely love marginalized people if the marginalized people agree with them and don't criticize them at all. Other than that, I think the fact that I have a problem with their stated opposition to gatekeeping that's followed with a failure to hold the New Democrats responsible for the roughly $20 million they spend every year on barriers to hormone replacement that don't just affect trans Albertans, but also affect cis women who have menopause or just need an estrogen supplement, or men seeking testosterone, that those barriers to reproductive freedom don't matter to this current crop who think that the Alberta Liberal Party is their birthright.
Somebody like Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is always talking about how he stands for minorities and so forth. Has he stood for you?
No, he hasn't stood for me. He hasn't stood for any trans Canadian. And again, he was the same person who went out with that reflexive woman's right to choose line the moment Roe versus Wade comes out.
The judgment coming out of the United States is an attack on women's freedom, and quite frankly, it's an attack on everyone's freedoms and rights.
The reason that it is harder to buy estrogen than get a government-funded abortion in Canada is specifically the federal government, which has scheduled hormone replacement. We're talking about medicine that is chemicals our own body make, medicine that is safer than aspirin, medicine that, unlike hormone blockers such as Lupron that are given to adolescents, don't have a litany of negative side effects. No, this prime minister doesn't care. That's part of the reason that I'm running. I don't mean it in the current context. I mean it with respect to the Trudeau family. I'm pro-Pierre and anti-Justin. Pierre Elliott Trudeau was an intellectual giant who understood the nature of Confederation and the choices people have to make. He stood for individual rights over collective rights. And we have a narcissistic dilettante who is harming his legacy at every turn. And you know what? It needs to be a card-carrying liberal who says so. Which I guess is why the legacy media doesn't want someone like me appearing, as you can attest from personal experience. We're at a protest, and you report on a trans woman who has some issues with the government selectively promoting drag expression to children, at the same time as they're banning all sorts of other groups from using the library. And CTV, City, and CBC, magically, that woman, even though she represents a larger proportion of the people protesting drag queen story time in that context than the people defending it, had trans women defending it. It's not worth reporting on to them, so thank goodness that we have an occasional journalist in this country. Democracy is an exercise in crowdsourcing opinion, and experts are never better at determining information than a group of people. And it's also worth noting that when I was born, the science said I should wear a dress and heavy makeup if I wanted to buy a chemical my own body makes. Turns out sometimes a bunch of self-appointed experts aren't the science, be it biology or political science or really anything. And that's why we believe in freedom and opportunity and a market-driven economy in the party that I'm a member of. And I guess it's just up to me to remind the executive of that.
For Rebel News, this is Kerry Diotte reporting from Edmonton. For more news you won't see anywhere else, go to rebelnews.com.